Hey, it's Wednesday and 7:30 Eastern. That's just about right time for breakfast with Jesus. Absolutely, we can have breakfast with him anytime, right? I love that. We get to hang out with him and enjoy his presence. Whew. Ah, whenever we make time for that. He is always there, and I'm glad that I'm here with you right now. Thank you so much for making time out of your busy life to come and hang out with me, whether you get to do that here live with the Breakfast Club or whenever your schedule permits, you can dip in and hang out with us, with the recordings and all of that. So great to be here. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Breakfast Club. Dee Dee and Norma, Patty, Cheryl, Elaine, Michael. Great to have you all with me here. I think there's Patty. The other Patty. We've got two, so I've got to make sure I don't confuse that. and But yeah, good to be here with you. So yesterday we started to look at the life of Abraham because in what he experienced, in his life, there's so much that we can take away from what he had to go through, right? As we saw yesterday, God made just one of the most amazing prophetic promises and destiny that really was ever spoken to a human. He's saying to them, I'm going to make I'm going to make of you a great nation. You're not, as I mentioned yesterday, you won't just be a patriarch of a tribe, but all the nations are going to be blessed through you. And, just amazing stuff. And that promise was because Abraham really obeyed the Lord. The Lord said, get up, pack up, get away from your family and take off to this land that I'm going to show you. A lot of times I've heard a lot of teaching on the idea that Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. That's not technically true, because his father had originally intended for them to travel from Ur of the Chaldees and end up in Canaan. Abraham knew that was the destination that they were ultimately supposed to go to. They didn't make it. Abraham's father decided, oh, you know what? Haran is nice enough. We'll stay here. And so we talked about that yesterday. So he goes out in obedience to the Lord. The Lord gives him this amazing prophetic word about his life. And what we see going forward is how Abraham really had to fight some battles before that word could be fulfilled. And that's really the principle that I think we're exploring right now. All of us have, on some level, been given a powerful destiny from the Lord. He created us, to fulfill something unique and profound that would, be life-changing for people in some way. I know if you don't see that, I understand. It's almost like, who, me? What, are you kidding? That's a whole other issue that we can certainly talk about. But that's the truth. Our purpose, our destiny here on this earth, is just beyond description sometimes. And, as Abraham shows us, there are these battles that we have to wage in order for us to fully experience what God has for us. And I think the reason for that, is kind of obvious. Whatever it is that we were created to do is designed to bring such a measure of the Father's blessing into people's lives that the enemy is not going to just sit by and allow that. He doesn't want people experiencing how good God is, and if we're called to do that in some way, well, the enemy's going to make sure that that's not going to happen. He wants to stop all of that. He wants to keep people ignorant of how wonderful and awesome and amazing our Heavenly Father is. And, we're called to represent Him and His kingdom. So, yeah, that's why we're dealing with these obstacles and hindrances and battles to really experience the fullness of what He created us for. So, we see in Abraham some of these challenges. We looked yesterday at how culture is such a powerful influence in terms of our mindset and how we view life, how we view ourselves. I mean, it's amazing. So you can go back and watch that if you missed it. So Genesis 12, we're looking at verses 9 and 10 right now. It says that Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. Wait, what? So God tells him, go to Canaan. And, in the previous passage that we looked at yesterday, and this would be, let's see, Genesis 12:5, right? It says that he took everybody. Oh, and by the way, he took a lot along. He allowed a lot to go along, right? And they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus, they came to the land of Canaan. So he makes it. He, finishes the journey that his father had set out to accomplish, but never did. So Abraham and his family and all that he had, they make it to Canaan. Whew, wow, thank God. End of story, right? Nope. As we said, as I just read here from verses 9 and 10, Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev, which is the southern area of Israel. It's a lot more desert-like. And it goes on to say that there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down even further south to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. So, there was a famine in Israel. And so Abram think, well, let's not stay here. Let's go further south to Egypt. And doesn't that sound familiar? We see a repeat of that, with Jacob and the life of Joseph, which we'll get to. We're going to talk about Joseph as well. So here's Abram in the land that God tells him to go to, and he doesn't stay. Well, why would he do that? Why would he move on from the very land where God said, I want to bless you? Isn't that interesting? But it's also, I think, illustrative of our own struggles, where we perhaps don't recognize how important it is to know where we're called. And I'm talking geographically. Abram had the opportunity to watch God provide for him in the midst of famine, in a land that he'd never been to before, right? But where God had called him. See, one of the things that we learn, and sometimes the hard way, is that the blessing of God is, I believe, most often tied geographically to where he's called us, that we are called to serve in a certain area, a certain people. And, as Abram did, we often decide, well, I think the grass is greener over there, and so I'm going to move over there, And God will still love us, he'll still bless us, but there'll be some aspect of the fullness of what he wants for us that we'll miss out on, because he said, this is where I've planted you. And we're looking over there going, yeah, that looks better. I think I'm going to go and move, right? And so Abram, again, remember the society that he came out of and was really still part of, very nomadic. They, even, when they were in a particular area, they lived in tents. and they would move around in that area, to bring their flocks to places where they could feed. And so, this idea that we're used to of, well, okay, I bought a house or have an apartment and this is where I live, wasn't in their mind, you know. So Abram, in that, old mindset, just decided, let's go further south, and that's what they did. And so the lesson for us is, Lord, am I where you want me? Right? Is this where you've called me to serve? Because being out of place can have some real consequences, as we're about to see. Um, and so, again, the takeaway is that we've got to recognize how, our just the frame of mind that we received from the culture and the upbringing that we had, a lot of that's going to have to be challenged. Lord, is this really something I should think and I should believe, right? And so that's what we're seeing here with Abram. He made a bad decision. He didn't stay where God called him to go, and it resulted in drama, right? So, again, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at how the enemy wants to keep us stuck in an old way of thinking so that we don't fully embrace what God has for us. So moving on here in Genesis 12, it says that it came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarai, his wife, "See now, I know that you are a beautiful woman, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will kill me. But they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you." Wait, what? I mean, when you read that, it's like, this is a Jerry Springer moment. And I know I'm dating myself when I when I use that reference. I hope most of you still remember, the all the nonsense and drama that occurred on the Jerry Springer show. But that's what we're looking at here. What's going on? What's motivating Abram right now, to do something so ridiculous? Yeah, you're not my wife. You're just say you're my sister. Ugh. We're looking here at the fear that was evidently a major problem for Abram. There's no other explanation. He's saying that that these guys are going to look at Sarai. They're going to, look at this beautiful woman. His wife. We got to kill this guy so we can have her. This is his train of thought. Now, he doesn't know at all what's going on and, who he's going to encounter in Egypt, but he's created this wonderful, crazy fantasy, that when they get there, that's what's going to happen. Okay. So now think about it, right? God has just promised him, "I'm going to make a nation out of you, and you will be the father of many nations." Now, in order for that to happen, he and his wife had to give birth to at least one child, okay? Now, they hadn't had any up till then, right? But that would be the way for that word to come to pass. But it didn't seem to register that way with Abram. He didn't connect those dots. That because God made him a promise, this is the future that I have for you, that you will be the father of a nation and the father of many nations, right? He didn't connect those dots to realize that, okay, so if God made that promise, then I don't have to worry about people killing me because that promise hasn't come true yet. You see how this works? That when God speaks to us and gives us a promise about our life, about our future, the enemy can't take us out unless we allow it. Think about that. We, we are indestructible until God says your time here is up. Unless, because we're not believing what God said, instead we're believing in some, horrible outcome that the enemy is feeding us, which is what happened here, right? The enemy's going, we can't have this father of a nation thing. If God's doing it, it's wrong, it's bad. And so the enemy's saying, how do I stop this? Well, he motivates Abram to have this crazy notion that he's going to be killed because his wife is so beautiful. So you be my sister while we're there, okay? And that way, But even that, right? As we'll see, that didn't turn out very well, right? So when we have fear on really any level, what we're doing is we're negating, again, whether we realize it or not, we are negating, really repudiating the promises that God has made, because we're now, instead of believing what God has promised and what he's showing us about his plans, his future for us, we're believing something else. We're looking at another outcome, And folks, this is something we all deal with. I've dealt with this all my life. I come out of a family that was very fearful in their approach to life. The culture of my family was, any ideas that I had that I would talk about with my parents, their immediate response, oh, that's too risky. Oh, that's never going to work. Well, don't, and many of you know what that's like, to be constantly shut down by people who are supposed to be behind you and believing in you, and the fear that is behind all that, oh my gosh, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? That gets deep, in us. And it takes a lot of intentional effort and work on our part to identify those lies and begin to overcome them, to absolutely replace them with the truth. So this is the issue that Abraham, well, he's still Abram at this point, but this is the issue that he's facing. He has been given, as I said, one of the most awesome promises and prophetic pictures of a future that anyone could ever have. And so the enemy immediately goes to work, in him to paint this alternate picture that, oh, you're going to get killed because your wife is so beautiful. And so he chooses to believe that and makes a choice here, right? Which is not a good one. So how do we start to deal with this? Well, I think we have to do, an honest assessment of the prevailing fears in our life. What are those fears that just constantly seem to be, in your face or in your mind, that have to do with the future that God has for you? I mean, most of us right off the bat, we can identify, at least one or two or three of those. Well, what are we doing about it? How are we dealing with those root fears? Because see, the fears that we experience and that we're dealing with are absolutely the exact fears that will keep us from fully embracing and experiencing the life that God has for us. Because the enemy is very strategic. All right? If you are called to, for example, you're called to a life of being a financial blessing to people. God wants to bless you financially in so many ways. Well, one of the core fears that you're going to deal with is, am I going to lose all my money? Am I going to to make a mistake that will bankrupt me? Will I, not be able to, you know, get that, that level of wealth that I have to have if I'm going to be able to do this thing? All whatever it is, the fears that we experience in life are generally going to be the exact kind of fear that will paint a picture totally opposite to what God is trying to show us and what he has shown us, what he has promised us. The enemy will paint something, describe an outcome that is usually the polar opposite of the promises that God has made, because he wants to divert our attention away from what God said, what he's shown us, to the enemy's preferred outcome. And so we've got to recognize that is the level of warfare that we're dealing with. So in effect, we can look at the fears that we deal with and recognize that if I flip that outcome, I'm back to what God's promised me. Again, if we're looking at the whole realm of financial prosperity, because you're called to be, a blessing in many people's lives through the effective stewardship of those resources. And your fears have to do with losing it or not being able to make it, failing at, becoming a steward of that or whatever. You look at that negative outcome and flip it. So the enemy's trying to make me believe that I'm going to go bankrupt or that I'm going to make all these mistakes, that will cause me to lose money, that will prevent me from gaining the wealth that I have to have if I'm going to be a blessing financially in people's lives, right? Well, that lie, because it's the polar opposite of the call of God on your life, you flip that. You say, you know what? I see what you're up to, enemy. And you're a liar. Jesus made that very clear. He is the father of lies. And fears are one of his primary, maybe the primary means by which he can get us into unbelief, right? Where he can influence us to stop believing what God has promised and what he has said. So, for me, identifying the lies that are at the root of my fears has been a very critical and important process in my life. Because if I don't do that, then I'm going to be double-minded, right? James talks about folks who are double-minded, and that idea is simply, I'm trying to, to hold two contradictory ideas in my mind. The one is what God has said and what he's promised, the future that he says, I know the plans I have for you. They're plans for good, not for calamity, to give you a hope, a future, an expected end, all these wonderful things. That's one aspect. And then over here, it's like, oh man, I just don't think I can do this. This is, I've failed too much, and, I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to, that's double-mindedness, and we all deal with it. Okay. We all deal with it. But the key, at least from what I've learned, is to confront those lies. We don't just kind of say, yeah, I know I shouldn't think that way. Lord, I'm going to focus on you. You can't not think about something. Have you learned that? When there's an idea in your mind, you just can't ignore it completely. It's always there. And you always come back to it, especially when stuff happens that triggers that thought. You know, it's there. And so it needs to be confronted. It needs, for us to say, yeah, so this is what I'm actually believing, that's what's behind that fear is an idea. It's a belief that I'm holding that is totally contradicting what God has said. And so, yeah, I got to deal with that. I have to confront that, call it what it is. It's a lie. I need to repent, says, God, I'm changing my mind. I renounce that lie. In other words, I refuse to give it any further influence in my life. I cut myself off. I bring it to you. We talked about that a week or so ago, bringing every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Lord, I bring this to you. I give this to you. This is a lie. I don't want this in my life anymore. I need you to give me a fresh, sense of what you are promising me. I just refresh me again with the truth. I want to hold fast to that and be freed from whatever the lie is that has been empowering fear in my life. Okay. So very powerful lesson that we're seeing here from the life of Abraham. And again, the idea here is that the enemy is always going to oppose us in the exact ways, that are polar opposite to what we're called to. And in many cases, when you start to understand how the enemy has opposed you, you get even a clearer picture of what you're called to, because that's how he works. He just simply, tries to reverse everything that God has said. So I hope this is helpful for you. It's an ongoing process, that we're all engaged in. That's mind renewal and, getting free from things that have just been part of us for way too long, right? So be encouraged. We are, again, learning how to exercise the authority that we've been given with regard to how we're going to live and what our life is going to end up looking like. Because we call more of that, more of that shot than we want to admit or we want to realize. So good stuff, right? My goodness, God is so good. All right, good morning to the rest of my amazing breakfast club. Let's see who else joined us this morning. Alma, good morning to you. Good morning, Melly. Yeah, we're all dealing with that. Madge, good morning. Welcome. Who else have we got here today? There's Donna. Good morning. Okay. Who else? Let me check this other one. Hey, Patrick. Good to see you, man. It's been a while. Let's jump back up here and see who else might have jumped into the other chat. And I think I got you all. Yep. Great. So thank you so very much for hanging out with me. And I appreciate those of you that are sharing this with your friends. Getting a few people to come in here that we haven't seen before is always great. And you know what? Again, if you feel like you're getting some value, you'd like to sow back into our ministry, I don't talk about this much, but that's a link that you can use if you'd like to do that, and I'd be very grateful. So listen, have an awesome day, and let's go kill some lies, shall we? And let's enjoy what Papa has done for us. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.